Okay, why don't we get started? Hi everybody. I think we have at least one person online as well. Maybe others will join. But thanks for joining us today. Thanks for your interest in this topic of AI usage, ethical AI usage. We're going to talk about kind of what that means and provide some, I think, overarching context around kind of the current sort of state of AI, what we know about AI in terms of like sort of usage, but also implications and impact. And then we're going to talk about how that sort of looks in the ECC classroom and about how AI usage sort of intersects with academic honesty and academic integrity concerns. So my name is John Long. I serve as the Associate VP of Student Services and Development at ECC. And I've been, since like 2016 or 2017, I took a role here that I was the Judicial Affairs Officer. And so all of the academic integrity concerns and violations came through my office. And that was true until earlier this year when Mr. Vinny Cassio moved into the Dean of Students role, and he's taken over our Student Code of Conduct issues. So that's kind of my connection to this work. I'll let my co-presenters introduce themselves.
Sure. Why not? My name is Vinny Cassio. I'm the Dean of Students here. And again, as John mentioned, part of my role is overseeing the Student Code of Conduct violations that may occur. So, should that ever occur from one of your students, we will be working in collaboration to really work through that situation. But amongst other things, that's part of my role.
Yes, I'm Maria Ashton Stubbings. I'm a librarian, an adjunct librarian here at ECC. I've been with ECC for almost 14 years. And I also teach information literacy at UAGC online. My interest in this just kind of came about as all of this interest came about in the last couple of years. So I've been taking classes and reading and studying on this topic for quite a while. So, yeah. Okay. All right.
This you want me to do?
That's okay. I can do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll try it.
All right.
So these are our objectives for our presentation today, but what I wanted to start with real quickly is what this isn't. This isn't like a huge overview of AI, how AI works, how to do prompts, anything like that. It's also not trying to tell you to use this with your students or not use this with your students. We're not trying to say, oh, this is a thing everybody should be using and focusing on that. We are trying to just give some tools to help you inform your students on when they maybe can use this tool or whether they shouldn't use this tool. That is completely up to you. But what we do want to talk about a little bit are the things listed here, which is the importance of AI literacy. And I go over some of the environmental implications and appropriate and inappropriate uses of AI. And then we'll also talk a little bit about the student perspective, talk about the steps of what to do when there's unauthorized use, and then where to go get support for that if you have issues in your classroom. I don't have one. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So by the numbers, so this is intended to give you kind of a landscape outside of academia, which is the type of things that are happening right now out in the world that people are seeing. So these are all cited in you'll see it a slide later, so you can get back to these articles and things. But 77% of devices have some sort of AI. And if you have opened your phone, opened a Google search, opened anything, you're kind of bombarded with it all the time. So if you're bombarded with it, students are also bombarded with it. 86% of students already use AI for schoolwork. And then over half of companies plan to incorporate AI, and right now 97% of business owners think ChatGPT will help their business. I think that number is going to change. I think some of them have found, well, maybe it's not as helpful as I thought, but that was the number at the time. But I think it's really important to note that 9 of 10 students want to learn more about AI in school. And 67% of people would use ChatGPT rather than Google, which is kind of a problem because they're different kinds of tools and they shouldn't necessarily one be used in place of the other, basically. So this is kind of what our students are looking at, and ourselves as well. So what I want to go into next a little bit is some of the environmental impacts. So why this is important is about 59% of millennial and Gen Z students are really concerned about the environment. And we don't really see this because AI is sort of this invisible thing out there that we don't really realize when we do a search what is happening. So this is an infographic that I made that I can share with students in some of my classes to just kind of show them like how AI impacts our environment. So things like the amount of AI, the 6 times down there for the number 3, the amount of AI related infrastructure that may be consumed in water globally in a year. That's a projected number, but that's more than in the country of Denmark uses in an entire year. Or 10 times is the amount of electricity consumed by a request through ChatGPT rather than a Google search. So we don't see that, right? We don't see those impacts to when we do a search, but like if students are just always going to AI, they're using all this extra water and electricity. And then the third part, or this one here, is the bonus fact. It's the to generate 100 words of AI text, it takes 3 bottles of water to cool those data centers. So it's just a point that you can make with students to make them aware, because AI literacy isn't just about how to use AI, but it's about the whole landscape of AI, how it impacts our environment and our communities. Okay, so continuing on that, this is a little deeper look at data centers, and there are currently over 8 million data centers globally. That's not all AI focused, but there's quite a bit of AI, and this has exploded in the last several years. And this has health, water consumption, and electricity implications. You can kind of see on there, because we are still, a lot of companies are still using coal and natural gas. Those are putting fine particulates into the air. It can have implications for people's health and therefore on the economy, the health economy. And tech companies are also building a lot of these centers in areas with water scarcity. So they're already putting these in like big areas where there isn't a lot of water, and that's taking away water from communities that are already established. It also will account for more of the use of electricity by 2028 there. And sometimes they'll say, oh, this isn't going to affect what you pay for electricity. We all know that's probably not the case. We all know that companies will eventually probably pass the cost on to us, and that's already happening in some places. And although they are working to use renewable energy, some of these companies are buying renewable energy certificates. I know that some are scrapping renewable energy projects, and I know the current administration has also gotten rid of some of the renewable energy projects. I don't know how those relate directly to AI, but the less people have an incentive to do that, the more this is going to affect. And I did just watch a video too that was really interesting on this community in Virginia that was having issues with noise. They lived not too far from one of these centers, and the noise, even though it was like, I think it was like a hum or something, but it was driving people nuts. They were having to go into their basements to sleep because of all this ambient noise. That it was through Business Insider or something, but it was very interesting. So, and it's affecting all these communities. It affects people's lives. It affects their housing, what they what they already have, you know, invested in their homes and communities. So you don't have to share all of this with your students, but I think it's important to explain to them what some of these environmental impacts can be so that they can use these tools smartly rather than just randomly, like I think a lot of us have used it in the past. Okay. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about bias and ethics, because this is another area of AI that I think maybe we don't consider. So I have a myth up there, and this is a myth that a lot of students might feel, or even some faculty. Because AI is not a person, it will provide an objective answer to your prompt or query. So AI is not objective. You may think it's subjective because it gives you back a response that talks to you as if it's being very objective, and it can be very convincing. But AI relies on algorithms, prediction, and pre-created information that is created by humans. So because humans have bias, AI has bias. Some studies show that AI platforms have a Western-centered point of view, which may not reflect global issues, ideas, or norms. That's probably because there's a lot of things in English that are getting scraped from the internet and things like that if they're doing it that way. It does really depend on whatever the generative AI is. You know, hopefully they tell you where they're getting their information. I know there's some, can't remember the name of it, but there's some that are more academically oriented that take from like citation indexes and things. So it's more citation oriented rather than information oriented in that way. But we also have ethical issues about that AI can be trained on materials obtained without permission. So they're just taking information without really compensating people for the information that they create. Workers do tweak these algorithms, and we have invisible labor that are called, they called them in this presentation I went to, ghost workers in places such as the Philippines, Venezuela, and Kenya. Those type of places don't always have great labor practices. So people are there working, you know, like sometimes you've heard with Amazon, you know, they're working long hours and they're trained to do these certain things. But I think all of these are just good things to let students know that what you're given doesn't magically appear, and it does have consequences and implications. Ooh, that's working now. So why should we talk to students about AI and the importance of AI literacy? And John and Vinny and I talked about this a lot in our meetings, is that students are often getting mixed messages and they're confused because they might use it in one class and not use it in another class. And some teachers may be saying, I don't want you to use AI at all, end of story, without a lot of explanation, which is understandable because sometimes it can be really complicated. I've been reading about this for a couple of years, and to get my head wrapped around it, you can't just like write a policy really easily. Also, students are hearing, and I hear this a lot too, that you have to have these AI skills to be competing for jobs. So if students feel like, oh, I'm supposed to be learning this stuff at ECC, why am I not learning this stuff? Or why won't my instructor let me talk about it or use it? So these are good openings to get your students talking about this and for you to be able to explain the proper ways to use AI. So I have a few things written down here. It helps users understand how AI works and its strengths and weaknesses. So we're not going into that today, but you can get into how AI works, you know, how this is developed. And there are some really great graphics out there that are helpful in kind of showing students in a way that they can understand the neural networks and all of that. It empowers users to make ethical decisions regarding the use of AI, which is what I was talking about before. It enables faculty to explain where, when, why, and why not to use AI in their classroom. So it gives that opening, but you can also explain, you know, there's nothing wrong with using AI in certain cases. In our case, we're doing A. We want your thoughts and your own research. We don't want to use AI or be using that for our class. use of AI can differ widely depending on the discipline. So this is again into that confusion. Some classes might be using it a ton, and then students go into another class and they're like, no, don't use it. And they're like, I don't know if I'm allowed to use it or not. And students do get confused, and then they panic. They're afraid they're going to be cheating or committing plagiarism or something. And so we need to be really clear with the messages that we're giving there. And then tacked onto that is it allows discussion about implicit and explicit biases in AI and other resources, which is a good opening for that, because I know we talk about that a lot in our classes. So I sum it up there by discussing the myths, strengths, and weaknesses around AI can increase transparency and trust, help students understand that AI is a tool rather than an end product. That is something I think they don't always quite get. And it helps students to be less confused about AI. I spoke too soon. Okay. So I have a couple of slides, and we just have a couple of people in here, but if anybody has anything to add, that would be great. So these are some possible appropriate use of AI in schoolwork. That doesn't mean you have to allow these or that you want to allow any of these or all of these, but I list these here: grammar checking, idea generation, identifying keywords, finding subtopics, creating an outline, and summarizing an article. So grammar checking, we probably can all agree everything you do has grammar check in it. So that's already being used. I don't think that any of us will probably say that's an inappropriate use. The only way that would be inappropriate is if you're having it rewrite paragraphs that you have done. But just checking your spelling or a little bit on sentence structure, I think is probably pretty appropriate. The idea of idea generation, that can be around just putting some terms in, kind of goes along with identifying keywords and subtopics. You put in an idea like climate change, and then it'll give you some information. And then you can say, provide me 10 keywords on climate change that you might find in a scholarly article. And that gives you keywords that you can search other places. So this works pretty well, and it can also help with subtopics. One thing that we find at the library and that we do a lot in our information literacy is to make sure that students are narrowing down from climate change or whatever their topic is, or PTSD, and really getting down to a more specific research question so that they are developing keywords that get them to that point. And that is really hard for undergraduate students because they don't have familiarity in a lot of these topics. So to ask a student to come up with 3 or 5 words on climate change, I mean, that could be hard, but you can ask the AI to do that. And that can be helpful as long as it's not part of like their assignment to, you know, develop their own keywords. That's a good way to do that. I like creating an outline as well, can be helpful. Students nowadays, we just had a professor that asked us to put an example of an outline into our embedded class because they don't have any idea what an outline is. And they don't know how to create an outline. And an outline is how you create, you know, and organize your paper. So you can put in some information that you've already discovered and researched and put it into a generative AI and ask it to create you an outline to start writing your paper. And again, I think this is kind of goes along with grammar. It just kind of helps you out there. And the last one, summarizing an article to help with understanding. I'm always iffy on this one. I've done this myself and it can be helpful, but the idea is you can upload to some Gen AIs an article, like a scholarly article, and you upload it and you can say, please summarize this article as if you were a first-year college student. And for those who are just getting used to using scholarly articles, this can be really helpful, or people who English isn't their first language, to say, okay, I'm on the right track with this article. You know, they're not just going, I have no idea what any of these words mean. They still have to read the article, but even sometimes for students, reading the abstract is even a little bit too difficult. So this is kind of on the edge of, is it appropriate, is it not? You have to trust that the student's gonna read it, but I would say most of the time, if a student is using it in their paper, they have to cite it, right? So, you know, they should be citing a quote or a paraphrase that with a page number that actually goes along with that. So hopefully they are reading it at the end, so. Does anybody have any other uses of AI that they use in their discipline or?
So 6 months ago, I would have not even thought of AI for doing anything.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so I'm very new, but really after the grammar checking, you know, I've been using it more with all the points you had kind of listed there, but more kind of bouncing back and forth.
Mhm.
Where, hey, I've got this topic and I'm looking to get some more ideas.
Mhm.
Hey, this looks great. So in the case of like, I don't know, business communications, there's hey, emails, but hey, what about utilizing your smartphone, you know, and just kind of going back and forth with just brainstorming. Although, you know, the more I think about that, and it does work in that aspect, I think I would also probably want to in my classes also incorporate actual surprise people getting together and bouncing those ideas off each
Yeah.
other as well.
Yeah. But it can be a good starting point for that if they're really unfamiliar and yeah, I think students don't always understand either that research is very iterative. It's not cut and dried, you know, A, B, C, and D. It's going to go here, and then it might go here, and then it might come back to here. So it is really important to have that where you're going back and forth and
Yeah.
exploring ideas. And I think that is something that AI can be helpful with. If people are truly, you know, my fear is that, well, the way I've seen it with some of my students is just that it's replacing research. It's a replacement as a quick fix. It's not to help them with the research process, really. But, you know, I can see using it for very positively in that way to brainstorm and to get ideas. And I did go on one time and look up, because I do marketing for the library, and I looked up like some marketing ideas. I forget what I put. I said like marketing for community college library or something. And it did bring up a lot of really cool things that I hadn't thought of, which was neat, you know, and it's just part of my part-time job. So, you know, it was a nice way to do that. So anybody else? Yes.
I've used it for like finding like different, like saying things in different voices. So like, for example, I'm gonna like send something out, but it's like themed or something like that. Like putting in what I want to say and then being like, you know, can you use a lot of alliteration or, you know, or like kind of something I did with my son at home. He had to like read a bunch of different pieces and kind of find similar themes. And one of the pieces was like a couple centuries old, which is not really where his 14-year-old brain was operating at the time. So we kind of, you know, used it to get like modern day translations so that he could find the themes a little bit more easily and use that to kind of synthesize. But yeah, so I think like just different, I don't want to say translation because that's kind of a weird way to phrase it, but like different voices, whether it's like a theme or alliteration or a different kind of older or newer or whatever.
It probably made the assignment a little more interesting also for a student, you know, and that could be something with students that you could say to your class or something that, you know, let's try to do this and let's get, you know, some ideas of how that would make this assignment more interesting and giving them some agency. And although with all those environmental impacts, I don't want to encourage everybody doing it, but maybe that person could do it in your class for everybody. I don't know, but anyway, okay. Anybody else? Victoria?
Well, you know, I'm just interested on the creating an outline and how that might be considered appropriate.
Yeah, because I think it depends. If you're if you're taking information that you already found, like if I were gonna take what we did and talked about, I did not do this, I just did this on my own because I know how to make an outline. But if I were going to, I could take the information and I could ask it to create an outline for me so that it could help me to organize my thoughts. It's not really, I wouldn't say it's appropriate to go in and say, I'm doing a report on climate change, give me an outline of what I should talk about. It's more taking your own information that you've already started to develop, like in a Word document. There are AIs that you can upload your Word document and then it can do that for you.
Got it, okay.
So that's where it comes in. Again, like if it's required in your class to create an outline, then I would say no. Then you have to tell your class, don't use AI to create this outline. I want you to try to do it on your own. But the one thing I think that can be helpful is if you haven't created a lot of outlines or you don't know how to organize, it can teach you how to do it. It teaches you how to do that. It's not always a replacement for it, but you know, if you've done it a couple times on AI, you're like, oh, I know how to make an outline now. I've got that kind of practice in my head on how this should be, so.
And that's what I was gonna say, like, I think all of these appropriate uses open up an opportunity for a dialogue with the student where, you know, if you were gonna have them use, and I think that it's a great example of like, you know, putting in the ideas that you have and saying, put this into an outline. And then like the secondary conversation being, okay, here's the outline that it created. What's good about this? You know, like why did it put this in, you know, the second paragraph and this in the conclusion? And how could you think about, you know, when you're going to create your own outline, when you don't have access to something like this, you know, what can you learn from what it produced here that you can incorporate into, you know, I was thinking the same thing for your example of like creating, you know, a themed email or something. Like there's a conversation after that to say, okay, how did it do this? You know, how did it pull together that alliteration and what makes that alliteration compelling? And why would we want to use that sort of thing? And so, you know, there's just opportunities for conversations, I think, to help, as Maria was saying, like learn from these tools rather than using them to replace learning.
Well, and also with the outline, like depending on the tool you use, like for example, if you ask ChatGPT to give you an outline, it will most likely give you like what a student would submit for an outline. But then I think it's like Perplexity will give you something that's significantly more pared down and it'll have links to different resources. So that might be like, if it's something that you are doing with students and you are saying, okay, this is an appropriate activity for us to do in this setting for these reasons, then you can also like choose the tool carefully so that they are getting what is needed out of it. So to Maria's example, like if they don't know how to organize things and they're getting something instead of just a completed outline, they're getting something that is just like a bulleted list with different resources so that they can kind of have that scaffolding as they walk through the process. Then that's, you know, different than it would be if they were just getting a finished product.
Excellent. Here's my stop. Inappropriate. I don't say possibly inappropriate. I consider these mostly all inappropriate and how I use them in the class that I teach. The first one is replacing your own writing. And I say this to my students, there is always 2 or 3 that ignore me and try to do it and then they're wrong and they get in trouble a little bit, but replacing their own writing. And I try to express to my students in my syllabus and in my guidance and things that I give students, like their voice as a student is important and valuable. Giving them the confidence to express themselves. Like I tell them, I don't want to hear something that sounds like it's coming from a Harvard professor. I think they think I'm going to use a thesaurus and I'm going to use, you know, ChatGPT and it's going to sound really good. And it might sound really good, but as you know, as a teacher, if you're teaching undergraduate students, it's like, I don't even write that well. Nobody I know writes that well, really, almost, you know? So, I try to express that to them so that they feel like they have a safe place to express themselves and to feel like even if it's not perfect, you know, I'm learning and that's okay. And provide, if you have good teachers who provide the students with good feedback, that goes a long way to helping them to have that confidence. And then obviously number 2, creating citation lists of items you aren't reading or using AI generated citations that don't exist, which are known as hallucinations. Has anybody seen or used those or done those? Or yeah, I always have students that I'll say, can you give me copies of your, you know, yeah, I'll get them to you. And then they're like, I can't find them. And I'm like, you know, so yeah, so don't do that. Substituting a summary or introduction created as AI for your own. So sometimes this goes along with replacing your own writing, but sometimes I think people will write and then they don't know how to begin or end it. So they just take what they've written and they ask it to create an introduction. And while it can be a learning tool, I don't feel like in most cases what we're doing, that's an appropriate use. You got to try to write your own summary and introduction and get used to doing that. Paraphrasing without your own editing and ideas and without citing, and using anything written from generative AI without citing or disclosing it. So we allow students to use Grammarly and the other school that I work at. But also I allow students, if they want to do the keyword thing, you know, we do have one little tiny part in one assignment of our 5-week class where they have to get keywords on a topic. They have to come up with a question. They have to come up with 3 questions. They have to come up with a topic, 3 questions, and 3 keywords. And most people don't use AI, but I did have a student last time say, you know, I found some keywords, but I don't know if these are exactly what I want to go with. So I also went on ChatGPT and I asked it for some keywords and here's the ones it gave me. So they disclosed that to me and that was okay. It's a small part of what they're doing and they have to do research to find articles in the library and stuff anyway. So I have to verify all that anyway. So I'm like, you know, that's fine. I think finding keywords is the least of what they can worry about. We also ask students to always check with their instructors for rules around the use of AI if they ask us in the library. And I have something right in my syllabus so that they know exactly. And I also have an announcement. I make sure it's in multiple places because I don't want people to get in trouble, you know, and I don't want people to be confused about it. I think sometimes students are confused about it. It isn't that they're just being lazy or trying to cheat. It's just that they think it's okay because they see it everywhere. So does anybody else have any other inappropriate? I cover a lot of them, but
I think just any like lack of transparency in usage.
yeah. And there are ways to cite ChatGPT if you found like a good summary on somewhere you want to point out that, you know, this is a general summary, but I want to add to it because I don't like how it says this. There are ways to actually cite it, MLA, APA, and I'll point that out in my sources. But
And Marie, have all those style guides been updated? Like,
no, they do have it on their websites, I think, though. But yeah, as far as the print goes, I don't think they've all been updated in the print versions. But maybe if you have like an online version of MLA, they might have it updated. What was that? Oh, okay.
2 librarians in the house.
Yeah.
The library's on it.
Okay. So this is just kind of summing up a little bit. So these are ways that AI can be used to help students. We use Grammarly at my other work. Grammarly, though, is used sometimes in the high schools, right? So they're used to using Grammarly and coming here, and whether they have a free account or an account some other way, that is something that they are probably already using. So teachers should be aware of that and know that, you know, what's how much of this is Grammarly rewrote the whole thing versus just helping with some phrasing or things like that. ESL is something that is really helpful. It can help with translation. It can help ESL students to know for example, they need to write an email to a professor and they don't really know the norms around doing that in our country, and they can ask it, you know, this is what I want to say, and then that can be helpful, and again, as a learning tool. And then the next two I really like, I think, and the other two I already talked about, but creating study guides. This is something with time management. You can stick your syllabus in and it can create a study guide for you if you ask it to. It'll look at the dates, you know, it'll kind of, you might still have to touch on it here and there, but it can be really helpful. And or me as an instructor, maybe I already created one without it, but you know, you can pop it in there and then you can send it to your students and say, hey, here's an idea for our fast 5-week online asynchronous course. Do your reading on this day or this day, you know, do your discussion this day, do your proofreading this day. And it kind of gives them a roadmap to handle all of that time management, because it's a lot that students are dealing with time management and they don't always know how to go about it. So that could be a really useful way. And creating flashcards, if you're in a, like maybe taking classes in the health kind of area, disciplines, you can put in some vocabulary and create, you know, your own little test for it to help you do that. So those are just my examples, and we've kind of been talking about our thoughts, but I just want to show you, and I probably have to click on here. These are all the sources I used for my stuff here. And then I have these 2 additional ACC library sources that I made, and one of them is our research guide. And this has kind of a lot of things. It has definitions. It kind of tells you how AI models work, the environmental impact and articles, teaching and using AI. We have the CETL here and LinkedIn Learning and some examples. So, and then here's the citing AI sources. So there's some links to that. So this just has a compilation of a bunch of things that I was studying, and I just kind of kept adding them to here. But there's a lot of really good things that you could use in a class if you wanted to. And then there's underneath there and on that guide too, there's an AI literacy tutorial that I made this summer that just kind of students can take on their own, or you could walk through it in your class, and it just walks you through some of this. It walks you through some examples using I have 4 different, I think I use Gemini, Perplexity, ChatGPT, and something else. I don't remember the 4th one, but people can practice using some practice prompts, and it tells you the appropriate way to prompt and the things you need to think about and everything like that. So those are my sources, and that is my part. And does anybody have any other thoughts on the beginnings of the discussion on it was a lot.
Really good.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Is it possible to share the presentation with the group?
See that they'll say with the recording.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's kind of one of the facts you shared earlier. Like the one that I'm still sitting with is the 67% of people like going to ChatGPT rather than Google for information searches. I mean, you shared a bit about this with like the ubiquity of just it's how much is pushed to us on our devices, but would you be willing to speculate a bit more on why that is, do you think? Like, why are people turning to it right now?
I think it's because it gives you an answer. It pops something up and people think, oh, it's just going to write out my whole answer for me. I don't need to do anything further. That's what I've heard sometimes. But, and I didn't really go into this too much when I was talking about it, but and John and I actually talked about this, like with any kind of generative AI, you still have to go in and you still have to do research, and you still have, but I don't think people quite always understand that.
Because I'm sitting with the idea, like everything you share, which I like a lot in terms of, oh, here's the positive ways to use it.
Yeah.
For the most part, those bullets, like there's not much that deals with like information. It's all sort of like organization. And it's this weird thing that I feel like AI has been pushed to us as an information tool. What you described is like it's not an information tool, it's an organizational tool. Like it's like closer to like almost like a planning tool rather than like a retrieval of information. I'm just sitting with that idea of like, oh, because that's been pitched, that's how people are turning to use it, but that's just not what.
Right, and some of it is already embedded. So if you were to just do a simple Google search, immediately you're going to have at the top portion of your screen an AI component that says, whatever the information that you're seeking, and then you kind of disregard the rest of the other links.
yeah.
So it is targeted and marketed as a informative piece, but in reality, one of the things again that we're echoing is that additional research component. Like you can't take it for face value. So I agree. It's interesting.
I think that's why, and that's such a great way of looking at it, that it isn't really it's meant to be a tool, but not to be an information replacement or a research replacement. I think that's why it ties so well with information literacy, because information literacy, you could use a tool like that. The example I give in the tutorial is I look up sea ice and ask it for a table on temperature of sea ice, but I use Perplexity, which I really like. When I've used things, I prefer that one because it does give you the resources that it's using, and then I can link right to the NOAA, and I can verify that information, and then if I wanted to use whatever table or graph they give me, then I can cite that I got that through ChatGPT, but you still have to verify the information. And I think that's the step that's missing. And I don't know how they're teaching it. Maybe you guys, when you do your part here, will have some more insight at how they're teaching it in high schools or not, or how they're using it, because that's where, like you're saying, I'm seeing the disconnect. And I have even heard this from colleagues saying, well, all I have to do is just put this in. I don't know why we even teach this anymore. And I'm like, what? No, because it is really important to teach students how to do that deeper research, and to let students have those skills and tools to know when to use this tool and when to use that tool, which thing's appropriate and not. So I could go on and on. Who's next?
No, I was just gonna say, I wonder, like to Tyler's point earlier and Maria's kind of speculation about why ChatGPT over Google, and I wonder if that percentage has shifted since Google started putting the AI responses like automatically.
Probably.
It'd be interesting.
I know it's really annoying to me. I mean, I am not against using AI, but like everything I do, even sometimes on some of our resources at the library, will come up with, and I know we're going to talk about that in a meeting tomorrow, but it'll come up with, this research assistant thing, and it provides, and it's like, I don't want any of that stuff. I want to, because I know how to use it, but also.
Well, and just for background information in the library, I coordinate our library automated system, which you all know is the iShare platform, but the technical term for it is Primo VE. So if you hear me talk about Primo VE, I'm very well trained on calling it that. But and then I have some electronic ebooks and other like encyclopedias that are introducing these AI research assistants. And I worry that people are confused as to what the research assistant actually is. The research assistant, it is not going to write your paper for you. It is not going to even create an outline for you. What the research assistant actually does is it will provide you with chapter takeaways. It won't even provide you for the entire book, but it will say, these 4 concepts are discussed in this chapter. So for me, I'm like a very pro person on this because I think it connects students to the resource faster to say, okay, this is a chapter that fits in with my topic. Whereas, you might say, oh, this isn't really what my paper is focusing on. So from my perspective, I really like them. And they're also very easily clicked X to close it. So my concern more these days is that some of the tools aren't quite there yet. So for example, Primo or the iShare platform that you all see when you're doing your library searches, there is a test research assistant that is not perfected. And one of the listservs I'm on just talked about recently how it was not bringing back any results for searches on genocide. And so that's a pretty big miss for the technology. So that's one of the reasons I get hesitant about implementing these with our resources, is because if someone's using the AI research assistant, again, not writing your paper or anything, but if they're looking for, Rwanda, they're not gonna get it, and they're gonna think, I can't do my paper on Rwanda because the library has nothing on it, which is false. So that's usually where my perspective of research assistants comes in.
Well, I think it's interesting, that is a good question, if like the, if the usage has shifted to Google because it's just in front of everyone. But I sort of am speculating maybe to your question, like, if you all have heard about, first of all, if you use many of the other AIs, they are trained to be fairly effusive when you ask questions. Like, they tell you how wonderful that question is, how brilliant you are for even thinking of this sort of thing, how, competent you are in your work because you're asking about work questions. And, they're trained to be this way. It's very inviting for people. People like to hear that. It helps, it encourages them to continue engaging. But there are these emerging stories that we're hearing about where people are beginning to suffer from like AI delusions as a result of this. There was one maybe a few weeks ago that I was reading about where somebody who, and this is particularly true for people that have mental health, instability, schizophrenia, these sorts of things, but not exclusive to folks in that camp. There was a guy who, by all sort of reports, had no mental health instability, no schizophrenia, and the search with ChatGPT started off by him asking it to explain pi in simple terms, and it got a conversation going where it was something like 8,000 hours later that he had engaged with ChatGPT. And at the end of that, he had become convinced that he had created a new type of math that was going to like solve, like Middle East conflicts and create new types of nuclear energy, because the ChatGPT had been reinforcing him and telling him that you're brilliant and you've stumbled upon something here, and this is just I think a very sort of normal human thing to want to believe that like you are special and smart, and that you could have stumbled onto a new type of math that nobody else had figured out here. So, that's part of it too, I think, is that these things have been trained to tell people what they want to hear, and it keeps them coming back for more information. So, okay, we're gonna switch gears a little bit, and what I should have titled this section is "When AI Goes Wrong," because that's really like what we're talking about. So, with academic integrity, so I will say before we talk about this, this is a place of learning, and our goal is never to be punitive with students and punish them for things. I think we always encourage faculty, whenever possible, treat academic integrity issues and concerns as learning opportunities for students. And I think by and large, most faculty do. Sometimes they will reach out to us for guidance and help on those, but they don't formalize academic integrity violations. But there are situations and instances where that is appropriate, where either a student has been warned about something, they've been through enough college level courses where they should have known better than doing what they did, or potentially, there's multiple instances and things like that. So that's just sort of, before we talk about this, I just want to lay that caveat out there that, whenever possible, we try to treat academic integrity violations as learning opportunities. And even when they get to the Dean of Students office, our approach is very restorative in nature, and we try to help the student understand, what happened and help them learn from it so that they can avoid those issues moving forward. So, what's really important to know, and I think Maria covered this very well, but we are not advocating for the use of AI in any way, shape, or form. It is very specific to discipline and instructor and the class, and maybe even the type of assignment that you're doing. And so faculty have full discretion to make the decisions about what is appropriate in their class and on a given assignment. to help kind of reinforce this view, Dr. Rager and Dr. Martin and I worked with a group of faculty. This was maybe in 2023, I want to say,
Sounds about
for a little bit, on a artificial intelligence position statement for the Teaching, Learning, and Student Development Division. And so this is just a summary of that. You can find the full statement on the CETL website. But importantly, you know, it sort of tries to make that clear that faculty have full discretion. There are positive use cases for this when appropriate, and then there are certainly areas where it's just not appropriate, and faculty need to be kind of equipped to make those decisions themselves. I will also say, so we have an academic integrity administrative procedure for those of you who are maybe newer or not aware of it. It does sort of lay out, among other things, our definitions of academic integrity violations, as well as the processes that we're going to talk about today. So if you haven't reviewed that, it's worth sort of understanding what's in that procedure, because that really guides a lot of our efforts here. And I will say the procedure was updated earlier this year to include, I don't know if I have fancy lights here, I don't, but to include, particularly under plagiarism, we spelled out specifically that unauthorized use of artificial intelligence is a form of plagiarism. It's not spelled out specifically in cheating, but you know, the definition of cheating also could include artificial intelligence as well as fabrication. There's other types of academic integrity violations, but these are the three that I think are most relevant to AI. Okay. So this is showing the number of formal violations that have been submitted to the Dean of Students office over the last 10 years or so. And this really tells a story, I think. This is what I like to I refer to as like kind of the good old days. And then, you see 2020, and we all know what happened there. All of our classes got moved, most of our classes got moved online. Huge, what then felt like a huge spike in academic integrity issues. And then by 2021, it was a combination of, I think, we'd started to move some of our classes out of the online space, as well as I think faculty were just adapting and sort of, recreating their assignments and making things sort of more cheat proof. But then in November of 2022 is when ChatGPT was launched. And that was really the first access that most people had to AI. And so, you see the numbers kind of start to tick up, but they're kind of in line. I mean, in 2015, we had 33 formal violations. But by 2023, you see there's clearly a trend here. And then last year, I think as more students became familiar with these tools, there also were more of them, right? It wasn't just ChatGPT, it's all of these other things that we're talking about. Last year, we had some sort of dubious honor of breaking some records in this space.
Do you know how many you have so far this year?
Yeah, good question. So this year, it seems like it's sort of tapered off a bit. I don't think we're going to see the same trend here, but we also are not at the end of the year yet. Right. And midterm and finals are when a lot of things. So I'll report back.
And a question.
I was going to say, do you, obviously with access to generative AI, it's like being able to produce a paper or an assignment without actually doing the work is significantly easier than it used to be. But do you think there's a component of faculty being extra vigilant because of students' access?
Yes.
Do you think the percentage of unchecked violations has decreased? You know what I'm saying?
I think so.
Are we catching a larger percent of them, or?
I think that's true. I think faculty are just kind of more aware.
Yeah.
So yes, but one of the other reasons I sort of refer to these as the good old days is because if someone plagiarized in 2017, we could go and I could find the book, or I could find the article, I could find the website, and I could point to it. And I could say, okay, you plagiarized, like whether you intended to or not, like that's a conversation for us to have. But unequivocally, this was cheating, this was plagiarizing. Starting really in 2023, almost all of them, virtually all of them, involved AI. All of the academic integrity violations. So no more, was kind of the old school, like, finding a website, copying and pasting, plagiarism. It's almost all AI. And so for faculty, and you all know this, it becomes that much more difficult to actually prove what is plagiarism and what is cheating, because there is no smoking gun, there is no website to point to. It is much more subjective and much more difficult. And the conversations that we are having with students are that much more difficult. Now, I will say that also, by and large, most students that are accused of plagiarism, many of them will admit that to their faculty member, and even some that won't admit it to their faculty member will, for whatever reason, admit it when they meet with the dean of students. So, probably 98% of students say, yeah, I did.
For those of you online, Vinny has such a grin on his face right now. As soon as John said they'll admit it to the dean of students, Vinny got a huge grin on his face, and started nodding.
Importantly, not all of them. And so we also, and the ones that won't admit to having used these tools in a unauthorized way, those conversations and those situations are quite tricky. We won't go into that today, but they take a lot more time and energy than they used to. Okay, so Maria talked about some of this, but the AI usage landscape that we're seeing in the Dean of Students office is heavily based in writing courses, for sure. I think most of the generative AIs that people are using are these large language models, and so they make themselves available to writing tasks, editing, but also math. So there's several apps now that are built on AI. One that students found and loved is called Photomath, and they simply take a photo of a math problem with their phone, and it writes out all of the steps to complete that math problem and gives you the answer. It's not always right, but it's pretty good. And so this is creating all sorts of challenges in math courses, as you can imagine. Also, there's image generation. We have a graphic design program here, and there's coding. You all know, I'm sure, of the uses of coding, and it's pretty good at coding as well, fixing code. So these are things that, as we're talking to students, they're sharing with us that they're using these tools in all of these ways. The New York Times had an article earlier this fall saying that about 70% of high schoolers are using AI in some way, shape, or form. And indeed, and Maria mentioned this as well, but many students are telling us in the Dean of Students office that not only are they using it, but in their high schools, they're required to use it, specifically Grammarly and ChatGPT. But Grammarly for sure, like many of our high school curriculums it's not, they are teaching students to use this and expecting them to use it. And then they come here and they get into a classroom and suddenly, and they start using it and they get in trouble for it. And they're very confused as to why. And they don't quite understand that, if any of you have used Grammarly, it will often, not only will it do spell check and grammar check, but it will suggest, phrase changes in phrases. And what I've had to explain to many students is that if you click yes enough on that paper, you get to the end of it and it's no longer any of your words. Grammarly has changed all of the phrases, made them sound maybe better, maybe, but it's, so they don't think about that as the same as like asking ChatGPT to write that paper and then submitting that. So there's a lot of gray area. This is new territory. My point is like, this is new territory for everyone, for us, but it's also new territory for our students. And having some sort of empathy and grace for, what they bring into the classroom, I think is really helpful here. So Dr. Rager and Dr. Martin and I worked with some faculty earlier this year on a faculty guide to academic integrity. This is really designed as a digital document. There's a lot of really good links in here, but I just wanted to provide a physical copy for those in the room so you can just kind of peruse at your leisure. But this has a lot of good information, I think, for helping faculty sort of think about how they want to approach AI usage and some of the things that they should be considering, whether they're going to use this or not. They should be considering of how they're sort of building their syllabus and their classes. And then the second part of this document is about like what to do if and when you suspect a student is using something unauthorized. So real quick, I'll just kind of point you to page 4 on syllabus design. And this is about, this goes back to what I was saying about sort of having some empathy for students and, not expecting that they think about AI usage in the same way that you do. So being really clear in your syllabus about your academic integrity expectations, and like, what are some examples of academic dishonesty? There's a link there for some really good sample AI syllabus statements that you can sort of pick from and tweak to your desire. And then things like what to do on the first day of class. So, make academic integrity a topic that you discuss on your first day of class. And walk students through what that actually means for you. Because as Maria mentioned, their 9 o'clock class may say, yeah, use these tools in any way, shape, or form. I don't care. I encourage you to, or maybe I require you to, right? They leave that class, they come to you at 10 o'clock, and you may say, no, I don't want any usage of this whatsoever. And that's kind of a bit of a whiplash for a student to wrap their heads around. Now, it's their responsibility to figure out what context they're in and respond accordingly. But we have to be really clear on our communications and our expectations with students. I also will point to, in the first day of class section here, Dr. Martin created this really great AI attribution table that it's linked there.
Adapted that. I cannot take credit for that.
Adapted it.
I would love to take credit for that. That was from an AI workshop. John, sorry, do you know where on the ECC site is this?
It's not on the ECC site, it's on the CETL site.
That's a great.
That's where I got it.
Let me share it with you.
Okay.
Yeah, the attribution table is a really good resource for just helping students understand like when they should be, how and when they should be citing things, and it breaks it down in a really useful way. So I encourage you to look at that. Okay. And then ongoing practices, making sure that you're, again, if this is a concern that you have in your class, make sure that you're talking about it regularly. It's not just something that you touch on the first day, but come back to it and talk, periodically throughout the class about what academic honesty looks like and how to engage in your class in the ways that you expect students to do that. Okay. This has been.
All right. I get to follow up these 2 incredible speakers. Thank you. All right, now let's get to the point of what do we do if we suspect academic dishonesty? It's a big oh no, right? One of the things that I always recommend to faculty or just individuals in general is just take a pause, right? Take a quick breath, just some deep breathing. But take this opportunity to review the assignment instructions, really what your course policies are. Were they communicated transparent? Were you transparent in your communications? Were you clear in your communications? Was there any opportunities where a student could have misunderstood what you were asking for, what the assignment is asking for, right? We also want to consider, the skills of our students and also potentially what cultural differences may have impacted their approach on how they attended to the assignment at large. And you want to take this opportunity to review the students' work closely. You know, are they conveying their thoughts in a certain way, or based on previous history of their submissions of their assignments? What are some differences? What are some things that point out that pop out to you that cause for an alarm or cause a little bit of a red flag? And take notes, right? Document what you're noticing. Write down what it is about that student's assignment, that paper. What's causing you to have some concerns about their approach? Is it how they're writing it? Is it the way they've written? What citations they may have used? If the argument in the paper itself is not providing any clarity, like are they kind of just all over the place? So there's a lot of things that you can kind of identify as you're reviewing the student's work, but also taking notes because it's going to be helpful as we move forward. No, what's working? Okay, there we go. So determining if AI may have been used, one of the things that I always caution as well as even though there are AI detection tools available, and it sounds so nice to take it 100% as like that is it. That's what they did. They use AI because this detector told me so. Not necessarily. And so I caution everyone to really be mindful if you do use these AI detectors because they're not always 100% correct. They're not even 90% correct, honestly. And they can offer quite a bit of false positives. And so you could be accidentally accusing the student for utilizing AI, but they may have never used it at all. And so it's really an opportunity if you are using that tool to use it as, again, a supplemental tool and not the end all be all, right? Yes.
I checked my own writing on an AI checker and it was like almost 2/3 of it thought was AI generated. And I was like, it's like, I'm not sure if I should be offended or.
I guess I am a great writer.
I did the same thing and had the same result, Victoria.
Right, yeah. And so again, you're like, wait, no, these are my own thoughts and ideas. I promise I didn't copy this.
No.
Right.
It took me 8 hours to write this.
And that happens. And so that's why it's really important that we don't 100% rely on those detectors because they're not foolproof, unfortunately. And so it can be used as an opportunity to kind of think about it, but it's not, again, should not be the sole, like this is foolproof evidence that the student used this at all. Instead, what we encourage, again, is to really find, if you're finding any inaccurate information, that can be dates, statistics, or anything of that nature that is included in the work. The tone of writing could be overly formulaic and structured, or maybe inconsistent with the student's previous work. So again, if you have the privilege to compare the student's previous work, then that gives you a little bit of an understanding of how the student writes, how they approach the writing of their paper, or how they approach the assignments historically. And if there's some inconsistencies there, that can be a little bit of an indicator or a red flag to be mindful of. Lacking personalized insights or reflections are making the connections in what they're trying to convey. That can be an indicator potentially as well, just to be mindful of like, hey, this is cause some concern, I want us to talk about this. Improper citations, Maria kind of made note of it before. When AI is used, sometimes they do AI hallucinations, right? Where they're fabricating information. They're coming up with just ideas to go along with whatever prompts that you're putting into the AI generator. And so those are what I've seen historically and some of the cases I've consulted on where the citations were made up. Those aren't real. So, and the student will own up to that. But if you see that, you're clicking on the citations and nothing's getting you to the article or the source that they're citing, yeah, that could be an indicator potentially, so something to be mindful of. Odd paraphrases of material, sometimes rephrasing the same points over and over and not kind of going into it can be something to identify and make note of and say like, hey, what happened here? Can you help me understand where were you going with this point? Instead of just me saying it in a nicer way. Um, some instructors may use Google Docs, so you can review the drafting history of a student's paper. So because it could show, how long they were writing, or if they just kind of copy and pasted it onto the document. Again, it's not 100% foolproof, but it is something to be mindful of and make note of. And that's something that you can acknowledge and identify in your conversation with the students. Almost there. Almost there. There we go. Okay, perfect. One of the things that I always encourage as well is, if you're reviewing the content, the student's content or student's material, you're like, you know what, I'm still on the fence with this, I'm not entirely sure. Reach out to my office, Dean of Students Office. I certainly do not mind assisting and going and working collaboratively and going over the material and looking at the students' content and kind of gathering my own ideas and then coming together and talking through what your suspicions are, what if the links worked for me, because sometimes it may have not worked for you, whatever that may be. I'm more than happy to collaborate in that regard. Tapping in your academic dean is another great resource as well.
In the library too.
In the
We will,
library.
yeah, we will check citations. We won't check for AI, but we will check to make sure the citations are real. But one caveat is, don't give us a paper with no citations and no sources. It does happen. And it's like, well, this is obviously plagiarized if it's not a creative writing piece. So only give us stuff, but we can definitely check citations for you and see if they're in our databases and easily accessible as well, because sometimes we'll get a paper and there'll be a whole bunch of items that are like, well, we can't get to most of these through our databases. You're gonna have to ask them where they got the full paper, so.
Yeah, and again, there are some, pretty sometimes obvious things to point out, and we put them on the slide here. Again, if you're looking for common AI formatting, oftentimes you'll see an overuse of floating, numbering, vague language, that will stand out to you as well. Or again, the student's writing is extremely strong. You're like, wow, I'm reading a graduate level type of paper, and within their first semester here in college. It's not to say our students aren't strong writers, because they can be, but if they're using strong, various big $10 words, you're just like, where did that come from? And sometimes it's not even within the same context that is actually used. And so that could be, some indicators. But again, if you need those additional eyes on materials, myself, the academic deans, the librarians, we are here to support you in that regard. It's important to acknowledge again that no just single piece of evidence is sufficient on its own. And really the allegations of academic dishonesty should not be made lightly, right? We want to be mindful of those cultural differences. We want to be mindful of that student approach and give students that opportunity to discuss how they approached the assignment. And that's where we go into the facilitation of that one-on-one piece between you and the students. So again, if you're suspecting unauthorized use of AI, I always encourage, and we always encourage for you to meet with that student one-on-one. So set time aside, could be during your office hours, or on another agreed upon time. When reaching out to the students, make sure you're explaining your concerns calmly regarding their essay or assignment, and that you just want to have a better understanding of how they approached it. Make sure that the invitation to the meeting is welcoming, not accusatory right away or anything of that nature. You want to approach the student with curiosity rather than an accusation. So understandably, having an emotional reaction is normal, right? Faculty, you are putting so much work into the development of the curriculum, putting in the work and researching the topics that you want your students to learn. So understandably, it's going to feel like a personal attack. 9 times out of 10, it's really not. There's so many challenges and hurdles and barriers that students go through that may have resulted them into utilizing AI or cheating or whatnot. And it's oftentimes not personal. But understandably, I get why we feel that way. And it's a normal human reaction. And so what I encourage again is just to be open-minded and and say, you know what, I'm gonna give the student an opportunity because I want to hear their side. This is a great opportunity for them to learn. And maybe I just misunderstood what they're saying. You know, again, this doesn't mean that they necessarily cheated. It's just let's have a chance to come together and talk it out. And again, allowing that student the space to communicate their process and discuss what other personal barriers may have impacted their ability to complete the assignment, you know, is really important. So that's, you know, that's that informal, independent response. Another response is, you know, after that conversation and you feel like, you know what, I think we need to formalize this because of X, Y, and Z. Maybe the student did disclose that, yeah, you know what, I used AI. It is what it is. I'm sorry. It is what it is. You know, it's a great opportunity to formalize that because again, that's another discussion that I can have with that student to further help them understand the importance of what this means, you know, and really help them understand not only, again, the implications of this, but also rebuilding that rapport with their instructor, right? Because you lose that sense of trust, understandably. And so what I want for students is to be able to go back into that classroom and not feel deep shame or feel like they're not able to still talk to you or ask you for support or ask questions. And I also don't want the faculty member to feel like I can't look at this student, you know, I don't want to talk to this student, not that you will, but you know, I also don't want you to have those and harbor those feelings either. And so we really make a concerted effort to really repair and rebuild that bridge of communication and support between you, the student, and the faculty member. Yes, I feel like you have a question.
Oh, no, I'm just really enjoying your Zenful approach to this.
Thank you, you know. In addition to like, again, when we're going back to addressing it independently or informally, you know, one of the things that we also include in our faculty guide resource is offering options, you know, and those options could be an opportunity to revise their work, you know, if they do disclose to you that they use AI. Whatever honestly is you deem is appropriate is great, and reiterating those next steps, issuing a verbal or written warning, even requiring the students to complete the writing with integrity workshop through the right place, that could be an option too. Anything of that nature can can work as long as the student is getting an opportunity to learn from their mistakes. I think it's incredibly valuable. And again, some of those options too can also be implemented when you're doing a formal academic integrity violation too. Following through with the appropriate actions. So if you do resolve it independently or informally, I really want to encourage that you document your action and communicate it clearly so that way the student truly understands what the implications are, what potential consequences there are, or what options for remediation, if you will. And again, if you do choose to submit a formal violation, make sure you take a chance to talk to the student about why you're doing that. You know, so that way it's not coming off as, you know, 100% shame. It's more about, no, this is what the process is going to look like. You're going to be meeting with the dean of students, and you're going to go over this process and understand, you know, the consequences of this. But it's a great, again, learning opportunity for them. And really, again, as John echoed, we really do take a restorative justice approach to working with our students because this is a chance for them to take accountability and to really learn from their mistakes. And again, rebuild that relationship with faculty. Reflecting on future incidents. So again, this is a great chance for you to revise your syllabus language or assessment design to clarify expectations. Share examples maybe to help students understand appropriate boundaries of what, when, and where they can use certain things, certain supportive tools, or just an example of like what a great paper could look like. You know, this is not saying that you have to model it exactly, but this is kind of the standard that I'm looking for. So use this as a tool to help you outline and organize your paper. And of course, contacting CETO for resources on clearly communicating AI expectations or creating assignments that discourage AI. And then finally, what support you have? You have my office, you know, you also have CETO, you have your academic team, and as Maria mentioned earlier, our fabulous librarians that offer some incredible resources and support. So you're not alone in this process at all. please, 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 if you have questions, ask us. We will help. And if I don't know the answer, we'll find the answer together.
I did have a quick question. Maria, I appreciate the offer for checking citations.
Yeah.
Is there, and I apologize because in the 6 years I've been here teaching, it's been supply chain courses, and this is the first semester where I'm doing the introduction to supply chain, which has a paper.
Oh,
So it's my first
yeah.
paper assignment this semester. Is there I mean, and if, like I said, I appreciate you being able to do that, but is there a practice for how we could do that, or is it just matter of just going on the check?
You can check citations just using our iShare platform, through the library if you want to check them yourself. Usually, we don't get a ton of these, it depends on the semester, but we'll get, 3, 4, 5, maybe every December and spring, because those are ones that are just kind of over the top, like the teachers maybe sort of checked it, but they're like, I still don't know, and they want that, like that triangulation thing, they want that extra eye to look at it. So yeah, you can just check it through our own things, or if you have something you're looking for and you can't find, you can just shoot us an email and say, I found these, but I can't find this one. Can you verify we have access to it or whatever? We're happy to.
Yeah, there's a low student count, so there's not going to be too many papers to look at. And on top of that, it's not due for another couple of weeks, but they turned in an outline 2 weeks ago with their citations on there. So I can check that. I mean, it doesn't mean those are going to end up on their paper.
Right.
Other ones won't be, but
That's like the very manual way a lot of people will do it too, is having students do like some version of an ENT bibliography, like between the outline and the final paper. Hey, give me your citations with a couple sentence summary of what that citation's about, how you're going to use it, which is a very manual way to do it, to kind of like see that up front and say, okay, that's how students interacting with it, so I don't have to go make sure it exists.
Yeah, so do you mind if I ask a question about citations then? Because I'm recalling when I would do my own papers for grad school, I would have to put in a link, like a DOI or a permalink for any electronic article.
Yeah.
Or is that,
That still exists, yeah.
okay, so are the citations that are coming through have no permalink or DOI?
Oh, they have a link, but it usually doesn't go to an actual paper. It'll say DOI not found.
So say, yeah.
Or it'll go to a different article. Sometimes I find it goes to an article that's kind of on point, but it's not going to that exact article. It might have those authors. It might even be the same journal, but not the same issue and number, and it doesn't really exist. So it's kind of tricky. It's hard. It's a pain to go through those, but yes, they are required, but they don't. I think students think we're not going to check them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those, if it sounds good or
Yeah.
maybe it's real, like,
Exactly.
yeah.
And that has happened already, so full disclosure, yes, I've encountered quite a few of those, but again, the students, when my conversations with students, they're very, very apologetic and will have taken full accountability and really want to repair that relationship with their faculty members. So I think it's a testament to you all as faculty, but also our students. The students are incredible, and they've demonstrated such accountability and willingness to learn, and I think that's the positive things that come out of these situations.
I also want to say when you hold a student accountable, even if it's just from that one-on-one conversation, that's showing respect for your other students who are not doing that. And that is something that I think I've had some students email me privately and be like, I saw this person's discussion and they literally copied my discussion, and I'll say, yeah, I'm on it. I'm going to have a discussion with them and bring it to whoever's attention. And we have support at my other job at Academic Integrity Office. And you don't have to go through anything formal with them, but they will provide you that backup and check your citations. But I think that's important too, because your other students need to know you're not just letting people who aren't doing the hard work just kind of slide by when they're working really hard to be accountable. So.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Conversation.